I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传习鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak with you again. Today, my presentation is called the Tao of Relationships, Part 1. I think it's going to take a couple of parts to cover all of it. It's kind of a vast subject. Specifically, today I want to talk about criticism and how it relates to relationships and how we have to be careful of it. And also what to do when we're the subject of criticism. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I want to start with chapter 33 of the Tao Te Ching. Those who understand others are intelligent. Those who understand themselves are enlightened. Those who overcome others have strength. Those who overcome themselves are powerful. So hopefully I can sort of paraphrase this beautiful poetry in a way that will be helpful. So the first part of criticism I want to talk about with regard to relationships is eliminating our criticism of others. I think we all have a critical nature. Human beings, you know, we're sort of wired to discern things, to notice differences, to observe. It's just, I think it's just hardwired into us. What you mainly see is people criticizing others, assigning blame rather than taking responsibility. I know professionally I see this at work a lot. You know, something goes wrong, as it inevitably will from time to time, and there are you know, people who want to work to sincerely make things better, and there are people who want to deflect responsibility and assign blame, and you see that. And you know, the thing about doing that is it really damages the relationships and the harmony of the workplace, because the person who made the error, more often than not, didn't intend to make the error, and so just criticizing and assigning blame, finding who to yell at, doesn't help anything. It doesn't further anything along. Criticism just causes bitterness often. Now, it's not that you don't want to try to make things better. Of course you can do that, but it involves more than assigning blame. I mean, if you want to find out who's responsible, that's one thing, but you might want to think about, well, what is it about the whole process, about the whole team, that why there was a breakdown, why there was a failure. And when you work together in harmony, you know, then you can get real change and try to help prevent maybe that particular mistake from happening again. So we tend to want to be soft on ourselves but hard on others. We tend to be forgiving when we make a mistake, or we make excuses for our mistakes. But with others, we see it that, wow, boy, they really messed up, and we tend to be hard. That's sort of the nature. But the Tao perspective is to take that critical nature and turn it inward to see your own flaws. That doesn't mean turning a blind eye to the flaws of others, but rather it's about, you know, having compassion. Instead, it means finding compassion for the suffering the other person is going through, and you choose to see the other person as a resource, demonstrating what to avoid in your own behavior rather than being critical. And you know, it's the best way to influence anyone anyways, because modeling correct behavior is the best way to influence others. In other words, what you do is far more important than what you say or think others should do. So to illustrate these points, I want to use a personal story. This happened to me about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's a personal story about a blender and a bowl. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, I came home from my early morning walk, like I always do, and I went in to clean up the kitchen, which is part of my routine every morning. And as I was doing that, I encountered a blender that had not been soaked the night before, and so it had this vegetable puree on it, and it was very hard to clean. Now, if you could have been a fly on the wall in that kitchen, you wouldn't have seen anything other than me standing in front of a sink and cleaning a blender. But if you could be, say, like Mr. Spock, be a Vulcan fly and land on my temple and do a Vulcan mind meld and read my thoughts, this is what you would hear. Why couldn't Wendy just soaked this blender? Now it's so hard to clean. I mean, how hard is it to soak a blender? Why couldn't she have just soaked it? And as I was engaged in this thought pattern, I looked over to the right, and I saw a bowl. And it was my lunch bowl, the bowl that I take every day to work. I'm sort of a creature of a habit. I eat the same thing almost every day for lunch. It's this vegetable soup. And normally I come home every day, and first thing I do is I walk into the kitchen, I take it out of the bag, I soak it, and then I come back a few minutes later and I clean it. But for whatever reason, I didn't do that. And I saw this bowl with caked on vegetable soup on it. And in that moment, I realized that I was the dirty bowl calling the filthy blender unclean. And I also realized that my mind was criticizing someone else for an oversight that I too made. I was being soft on myself, but hard on someone else. And once I saw the bowl, I immediately thought of the Chinese coin. So there on the bottom right there, I have sort of my little diagram of what the Chinese coin looks like, which I'm sure we've all heard Derek talk about that many times. The idea is to be square and rigid and exacting with yourself, but to be soft and forgiving to the world, like the round part of the coin. But what I realized was I was in the middle of gearing up to do the exact opposite of that. I was going to be the reverse Chinese coin, and what might that look like? Well, sort of what I have on the left there on the bottom. This, very square and rigid and exacting with the world, but soft and easy on myself. And I realized this isn't what I want. I have to change these thought patterns. So being aware that seeing that bowl triggered that in me, and it allowed me to be aware that I had to change these thought patterns. And I put myself, once I did that, I was able to put myself in Wendy's shoes, and I saw things from her perspective. I knew that the night before, when I'm thinking about it, and I stopped whining and I'm thinking about it, I realized that she was scrambling to, get Christopher's vegetable puree ready for his occupational therapy the next morning. And, she had a lot of things going, as we all do. We were both tired. It had been sort of a long day. And so I saw things from her perspective. And of course, it's funny how all these things come together, but as soon as I did that, who should appear in the kitchen but Wendy? And the first thing she says to me is, she says, "Hey, thanks for cleaning the kitchen. Sorry I didn't get a chance to do it last night." And I said, "Hey, don't worry about it, no problem." And I shared with her the reminder I just got about being like a Chinese coin and how I need to work on that more. And as always, Wendy was kind and supportive. Internal struggle with that. And it's funny too, because this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, but she asked me a few days ago, "Hey, what presentation are you going to do?" And I go, "Well, I'm going to talk about relationships a little bit." I may even use that example we talked about a few weeks ago. She goes, "It's funny you bring that up. I was thinking about that and how it relates to how I deal with Ellie sometimes." And it's just, the thing about Wendy is she's so helpful to me, because she sort of takes anything that I'm struggling with and she makes it her own and realizes that she can apply it to her life too. And it's like together we work through things together and we grow together. It's a wonderful thing that happens. So I want to put in a quote here from IYANLA VANZANT, because I think it really hits the point. Criticism does not make you smarter or better than the one you are criticizing. In fact, the stuff you are critical of in others is the same stuff you don't like about yourself. I think this is very true. I think this tends to be very true. We overlook our own stuff, but subconsciously we know it's there. And so we see it in others and we try to magnify it. And that's not the Tao. The Tao is to be exacting about ourselves, but soft to the world. Okay, so that's one aspect of criticism. But there's another aspect too, and that's this. What can be done once you've overcome your need to criticize others, but criticism is still being received from others? It's still a reality. It still happens to you. And let's face it, if you live long enough, whether it's justified or not, sooner or later you're going to be the subject of someone else's criticism. And when that happens, I think the first thing to do is ask yourself honestly, is the criticism valid? And if it is, then you should try to cultivate a thankful mindset for the critique, because that critique may have made you aware of something that you weren't previously aware of, and you can't fix something if you don't know it's a problem. So it's very helpful to recognize the difference between constructive criticism and just something else. So, and oftentimes the criticisms we encounter can often be from people who love us, who sincerely want us to get better, and who want to point this out because we're not aware of it. And then, of course, you have to accept responsibility and take action to change the flaw that you may have been previously unaware of. And now I'll just throw in a little quote here from Winston Churchill, because I think it fits. Criticism may not be agreeable, but it is necessary. It fulfills the same function as pain in the human body. It calls attention to the development of an unhealthy state of things. If it is heeded in time, danger may be averted. If it is suppressed, a fatal distemper may develop. I think that's so true. If we accept constructive criticism correctly and realize that it's a sort of a signpost that we need to change something, and if you ignore those signposts, you can do damage to yourself and definitely to your relationships too. Okay, so all that is well and fine and good when the criticism is valid, but of course there's going to be times when criticism is unfair. I think we've probably all experienced that at some point in our lives. I certainly have. And the thing is, the thing to do is to think contrary to the misconceptions that often prevail about the Tao, about non-action and not reacting to attacks. Remember that the Tao is actually about dynamic, unattached action. So you're not, when you can encounter an unfair criticism, it doesn't mean that you should just be a doormat and just take it and not say anything. Not at all. And if you do that, those feelings can really stick with you and hurt you. So you don't want to get emotional about the attack and let feelings of hurt dictate your response. You want to give if you can, and hopefully it's not happening in real time, it usually doesn't, but sometimes it does. You want to try to ignore your initial emotional response, let that sort of settle down, so that the feelings you might have hurt about this criticism, especially if it's unfair, won't dictate your response. And when you do that, it's going to give you clarity on the situation. Most invalid criticism is usually done behind your back, and then inevitably it gets back to you. That's usually how invalid criticism works. I'm not saying it can't happen face to face. It can, but I will tell you this. What I've noticed is someone who comes to you and takes you aside and tells you face to face about a problem, chances are when that happens, they're probably talking about a valid criticism. It doesn't necessarily always have to be true, but I think those kind of encounters usually are. If they're not, if you encounter someone face to face, the best thing to do is complete a feedback loop and just sort of restate the criticism, let them know that you've heard them, give them a chance to hear it out loud, especially if it's ridiculous, if it's a ridiculous criticism. Because sometimes when people hear it without being the ones talking, saying it, and they just sort of hear it said out loud, it puts the ball back in their court, and they may rethink it. Or it may be valid, which I said. I think when you have someone who cares enough about you to take you aside and give a criticism, there may be something to that. Now, some people will just do that in front of a bunch of people. They'll criticize you in front of a bunch of people, and it might be an unfair criticism. So it's a good thing to sort of repeat the feedback loop, say it out loud, show them that you heard them, and then basically, if it is an unfair and valid criticism, confronting the critic takes courage, but it is the best thing to do, and you should do it. And basically, you should let the facts speak to themselves. So you might go to the person and give them a chance to voice the criticism face to face, and stay calm, keep the emotions down, state the facts that make the criticism unfair or untrue. And after that, after you've done that, no matter what the outcome, once you face the issue and stated the facts, it's time to move on. It's time to be like the pang bird and fly above it. You've done everything you can do about the invalid, unfair criticism, so it's time to move on. And that becomes easy when you go through the processes there. And I want to throw this quote in from Plato because I think it's so good when talking about the criticism that other people may direct at you. When men speak ill of thee, live so as nobody may believe them. That really is what the Tao is. It's about taking action to change yourself or to live in a way that's healthy. And when you do that, it'll improve all your relationships generally. So I'm going to start to sum it up here. I want to sum up the Tao approach to managing relationships successfully. Developing awareness about your own nature is the key to having healthy relationships. Taking action to change the way you approach criticism is good. You don't want to be critical of others. You want to sort of turn that gaze inward and look at your own flaws, the things that you need to work on for yourself. Because ultimately, it's in modeling correct behavior that you have the best chance of having an influence on others. And in order to model correct behavior, you have to work on yourself. It's work. Striving to be like the Chinese coin and not the reverse Chinese coin. You want to be soft and forgiving with the world, but exacting and tough with yourself. And when criticism happens, don't sulk. Take action. If it's a valid criticism, accept responsibility and work to change the problem. If the criticism is truly unfair or untrue, don't just take it, because unresolved issues will just fester and upset you and derail you. Take dynamic, unattached action by quelling your emotions and confronting the problem head on. Move on and live life in a way that no one will be even tempted to believe the criticism. And taking dynamic, unattached action will have a positive impact on your relationships. Like with all things with the Tao, it's not enough just to study it and have a theory of it intellectually. You have to put it into practice. You really have to work. And it's not easy, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it to help you live a better, more fulfilling life. So I just want to end with this one quote from Teddy Roosevelt, because I really like it. I think it covers both aspects of criticism. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is not effort without error and shortcomings. But who does actually strive to do the deed, who knows the great enthusiasm, the great devotion, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Okay, so there it was, part one, the Tao of Relationships. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak with you. I hope I said something that was of use, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.
Alex, thank you so much. Those are phenomenal quotes. I really learned a lot from your presentation. And I also want to compliment you in that your understanding of the Tao, Alex, is very accurate. I'm actually glad that my microphone is muted while you were speaking, because I definitely laughed out loud upon hearing the reverse Chinese coin. And this has the potential of becoming sort of a specialized language for us. When you say to people, "I want to be a Chinese coin," people probably have no idea what you're talking about. But it can be a very meaningful statement on your part. Alex, also some feedback from Elaine. Food for thought. Thank you, Alex. From Tim. Wow, Alex, you are a superb presenter. Thanks once again. And from Paul, I think criticism is not beneficial when the premise is not at all critical of finders in this presentation. And I'd like to add, Alex, that not only are you an excellent presenter, but you are a clear thinker. The one quote that I think I probably benefit from the most is the one that says, when you criticize, what you criticize in others is what you don't like in yourself. I find a lot of truth in that. I try to remind myself of that all the time. It brings me back to back in the days when I was contemplating setting up a website called Taoism.net. At the time, which was the late 1980s, the late 1990s, I should say. 1998 is when Taoism.net was created. At that time, there were several other websites that had similar Tao-related themes. So this being the early days of the internet, most websites were not very sophisticated at all. So I heard a lot of criticisms on various websites. And the temptation was strong to jump in and join the chorus of criticism. But what I said at the time, which I still believe in today, is that I did not feel like I had the right to criticize other websites until I have created something that was better. And ironically, after I put in the effort to create something on the internet, that's when I began to realize, that's when I started to see how much work was involved on every little thing, every little detail, the mistakes that are made, the mistakes to be corrected. It just it seemed endless sometimes. So when I had that first-hand experience of creating the website, you can bet that criticism of other people will be the last thing on my mind. I would only be glad that they had actually put in the effort, despite how much work it was, especially in the early days, to make their thoughts available as content on the internet. So my heart was filled with gratitude and not criticism at all. And I would further extend the idea and encourage everyone to think about that which you hate in other people. What I find to be true for myself is that what I hate in others oftentimes is what I fear in myself. When I told people that I hated bureaucracy, and I look at myself more deeply, I realized that I was afraid that if one day I gained a certain amount of power to have control over things, that I was afraid the power would go to my head, making me just as bureaucratic as some of these officious people were, but without being aware of it. That is what I was really afraid of. So by dealing with that fear, the dislike, the visceral dislike of other people also tended to vanish. Well, anyhow, I've probably taken more time than I should. Alex, once again, excellent presentation. Hopefully, many more to come. Can we expect part 2 next week?
Yes, I'll be working on part 2. There's a few other points I want to make about relationships. This is kind of the beginning. So thank you all so much. I hope what I said today was helpful in some way.
Well,
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架规则是一鞠躬，接班一鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to taoism.net/Tao